I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Currently 63. Next news at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas Coffee, roasted fresh daily in Batavia, Illinois.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Before we talk June jobs numbers with our friend Scott the Cow Guy, just since we had an interesting Independence Day holiday weekend with the Socialist Spice Girls and CAP and culturally all courant outlets like Teen Vogue hating on America, maybe an outside perspective. Excellent interview over at Daily Signal with Jennifer Zhang. She is a Chinese dissident. Grew up admiring the Communist Party in China, adhering to its stringent rules, but her life changed forever when she embraced religion and was swept up in the Chinese government crackdown on Falun Gong. You see them praying outside the Chinese embassy in Chicago all the time.
All the time, yep.
She was arrested 4 times, sent to Beijing female labor camp for practicing Falun Gong. She writes, or she says in this interview, for the first moment, we were forced to squat under the baking sun for 15 hours. Whenever someone couldn't endure it and fainted away, they were shocked by electric batons so they could wake up. Every day in the camp, it was a battle between life and death. She also talks about an organ harvesting program that was done by her Chinese captors.
My God.
I only realized that I had a very narrow escape from being a victim of this organ harvesting because I had hepatitis C. On the second day, talking with her at the camp, 2 police officers dragged me from my cell to the coal, threw me on the ground, and applied 2 electric batons all over my body until I lost consciousness. The torture I experienced and saw was beyond description. The police would also throw females into male prisoner cells to have them repeatedly gang raped.
Oh, God.
I think the worst part for me in camp is the brainwashing part, because the police made it very clear the only purpose for you to be sent there is to get you reformed, which means to change our minds toward Falun Gong. She's written a book about this experience, Witnessing History, One Woman's Fight for Freedom, and Falun Gong, and we're going to try and get her on the show to talk about that. But she's got a message for all of the Democrat socialists who look at Kamala and Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and the rest of them and say, oh, this is so exciting. Socialism is so exciting. And not to mention the Socialist Spice Girls who were hating on America over the weekend. Writes or says, Jennifer Zhang, I think in the early days when the Communist Party was just founded in China, they also talked about freedom, talked about equality, talked about everybody living in heaven-like communities and society. Many young people got deceived. They went to the sacred place of communism. If you look at the history, many of them ended up being killed by the party, and all their families, all their children, they all suffered for generations. Under the Communist Party in China, 80 million people died unnatural deaths, all the result of communism. Socialism is only the primary stage of communism. Actually, officially or theoretically, China now is not a communist country yet. It's still socialism with Chinese characteristics. Officially, China is now a socialist society. If you want communism or socialism, I think you should read more about China. You should read my story first to know what the socialism really is. I think too many young people, they're very easy to be attracted by those rosy, empty words and the rosy description of how beautiful those things are, but the reality is just the opposite. If they know what those damage or how people have suffered, more than, I think, 1/2 of the population of Chinese people have suffered one kind of persecution or another, they would stop having those rosy dreams about communism and or socialism. For more on this topic, because this is the battle in 2020, I mean, and by the way, the Chinese communists practice state-driven capitalism. Isn't that what is being proposed by so many presidential aspirants, many members of Congress, too? State-driven capitalism. We're pleased to be joined again by our friend, Scott the Cow Guy, Scott Shellady, Fox Business contributor. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Good morning.
Well, just a sort of a philosophical point. You're a philosophical guy in addition to a numbers cruncher. What about that? How do you see the 2020 election shaping up in terms of the question as to how our economy will be organized?
Well, there's no choice. I mean, we have to continue down the same path that we're on now. There isn't that the choice to go the way left or what you were just espousing is not a choice. It can't happen, and we can't survive in that environment. So, like everybody else over this last 4 or 5 days, and I did happen to watch Trump's July 4th speech, and yeah, some of it's corny, but the flyovers are cool, and as I watched it with my family, pretty much everybody in the room just kind of made them feel good about being an American, but we did reflect on the fact that, gosh, it's just, you can't really go out there and beat your chest and say, that made me feel good, I'm a patriot, I feel patriotic, because you'll get beaten up because patriotism is now somehow deemed bad nowadays. It means maybe you're a racist or something. So this whole, I don't know where it stops, Dan, and I've talked about it a lot on the radio over the last 2 or 3 weeks, but where does this all end when we keep going down this route of everything needs to be free, everybody needs to be inclusive, except you have to do everything the way I say you have to do it. Right. I don't know how the average person can run a household, can run a business, can run a country with the ideals of what they're talking about now. I just don't see that. I don't see how it can happen.
And then you have Colin Kaepernick, one man deciding what a billion-dollar company should do with patriotic shoes, and then 5 police officers or 6 police officers getting kicked out of Starbucks in Tempe, Arizona, because somebody felt scared.
Well, I mean, the Kaepernick thing is, I mean, he's nothing. What's embarrassing about that is the corporate boardrooms of America that fold to that stuff.
Yeah.
Just like they did when Chase put out a couple of ideas of how you can save money, and then all of a sudden that's racist and discriminating. That's a joke. The corporate America is just as bad as all the candidates standing up on the 20 candidates standing up for president on the Democratic side, and hey, I didn't realize you could pick and choose when you liked your police officers or not. I mean, you get kicked out of Starbucks and 2 seconds later you call 911. Why should they come?
Right, exactly.
Looking at the June jobs numbers posted on Friday, 224,000 new jobs above market expectations. Unemployment edged a bit higher. Wage growth 3%, 3.1% year over year. So pretty good report in June. Showed maybe not the economy not slowing as some had predicted.
Well, yes. I mean, it's slowing, but I mean it's still growing. It's growing at a slower pace, and I think I need to beat that into everybody's heads, right? Just because it is slowing, we are still growing. So would you get rid of all 5 of your basketball team starters if you were improving at a slower pace, but you were still improving? I mean, when you look at it like that, I mean, everybody's kind of got to get a grip here. And we have everybody banging out about rate cuts. I got to tell you, I've been doing it 31 years. Mm-hmm. The idea that we can spend this much time talking about rate cuts with the equity markets at all-time record highs really does not sit well with me and smells real funny, because I've never in my life of doing this job have ever talked about a rate cut with equities at all-time record highs. Now, either things are great and the land is, of the U.S. is rosy, or we are experiencing something slowing down to the point where we need to do something drastic and cut rates and make things better. You got to choose one. You can't have both, right? So you can't talk about how great things are. We're going to see Trump get elected again, and by the way, I need a rate cut. That doesn't work.
Well, is the continue talk about a rate cut though just the still sort of reaction to the criticisms of the Fed that they moved to raise rates too fast, and then now have sort of walked back on that. Powell has walked back on that. So it's almost like you're just sort of keeping the apology going.
Yes, and that is what he's doing. And I think that worst case scenario, okay, hold on. My best case scenario would be that he only takes back the one that the rate hike he did in December and says that's it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to wait and see here. I think the market could digest that, but to suddenly go on this spree of talking about 2 and then maybe 3 rate cuts or even a 50% basis rate cut. I mean, I think I'm going to go on the speaking tour this fall, and the whole thing's going to be careful what you wish for, because if you don't get the desired outcome from a rate hike with equities, a rate cut with equities at an all-time record high, that stinks. Okay, you need to see something. You need a rocket shot, or you need to see these things really start to take off. Because if you don't, it's because really you've got a psychological problem on your hands that I don't know if you have an answer for. Because you're not going to be able to turn around and cut rates again to stop a slide, because you just started a slide by cutting rates. So they got to be careful. It's very dangerous ground they're in right now, and I think by doing as little as possible probably is the best course of action.
What is going on at Deutsche Bank? The announcement on Sunday of a major overhaul, including gutting its stock and bond trading businesses, reducing headcount by as many as 18,000 out of 90,000 workers over the next couple of years. Pretty substantial.
Yep.
Is that any sort of canary in the coal mine with respect to big banks?
Yeah, I had the same thought a little bit. I actually used to work there in the mid-'90s in London. And what
They've
they
never
did is
recovered.
No,
Did you
exactly
wear
right.
the jacket back
Right. The
then,
only thing that made
Scott?
money was the cafeteria, right? But they got very aggressive in the mid 2000s when a lot of other people did, but they went they went whole hog, threw the towel in aggressive, and they haven't been able to recover from that. So this is like them having hit the restart button, and they should do, because it's been pretty bad. And their debt's been pretty bad, and the way that they manage their business has been pretty bad. They've gone through a bunch of CEOs as of late, so they just never have gotten their feet after a lot of the big banks did after the last crisis we have. So this is going to have to be something that really puts them in the straight and narrow, or it could be a canary in the coal mine if this doesn't work.
But I mean, you see this as isolated. It has everything to do with Deutsche Bank internally more so than the market externally.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
Speaking of
because
CEOs, I was just reading an article about their wage growth. I mean, an average CEO got a $500,000 pay bump in 2018
Average CEO of what?
of any company. That's what they're saying. And that while the
no.
average U.S. worker got an extra 1,000.
Amy,
No.
Is this fake news?
In the 70s, it wasn't an issue, and it was only in the 80s it started to be an issue, because we went to this shareholder-centric kind of idea in the boardroom of most U.S. corporations, and the Jack Welchians out there, right, who really espouse this: you have to reward the shareholder and the shareholder only. In the 70s, we used to have representation from the workers on the board. There was 3 people. There was 3 factions, right? We had the management, you had customers, and you had workers, and all 3 were generally represented equally on these boards. But when we got in the 80s and the go-go 80s and the 90s, they dropped the worker out of that equation, and it was only the board answering to the shareholders. And so that's been the problem as of late, and that's why it's gotten way, way out of hand, is because we've kind of really forgotten about the people that help people get there. Now, I'm not saying it has to be 100% equal, because the management takes risks that they're going to be, their head's on the line if it doesn't work out. If you work for a company and they tell you to do something that doesn't work out, you guys just move on to a different job. You don't get canned. But there definitely has been a shift in our corporate culture where we have left the worker behind, and that was something that happened probably even 30, 35 years ago.
Well, I mean, left the worker behind. I mean, 401ks. I mean, obviously there's been some ups and downs with those. You've moved from defined benefit plans, I mean, except in the public sector, a place like Illinois, to defined compensation plans, and we see worker pay. I mean, we talked about it just year over year is 3% wage growth, which is not bad. It's certainly an improvement over the first 15 years of this decade. So, I mean, should we be in the business of worrying about what private companies, including publicly traded companies, are paying their CEOs? Isn't that a matter for shareholders?
Yeah, 100% a matter for shareholders. But so far they've been getting fed from the boardrooms so much so that that's exactly how they do it. They like it. But I agree. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy the stock. If you don't like it, you don't have to be involved in the company. and that is absolutely 100% capitalism at its finest. It's just that it has ballooned a little bit as of late, and it's only, I guess, it would be shareholders and the CEOs kind of sucking their own exhaust. That's all. There could be a little bit more representation for the worker in the boardroom. I don't think that's a bad thing. We have really gone away from it over the last 35 years, and again, corporate America, or at least the shareholders, if they don't like it, they can sell the stock, and if they do